All right, welcome to Baking an Online Multiplayer Cake by none other than yours truly, Andrew Weller. So, here's my credentials. I once baked a loaf of bread and I once wrote a line of code as well. I've actually done that last one multiple times. So, let's get started, right? And let me let me say this is actually about video games. It's not about cakes, okay? I'm not an expert in cakes. So, let's bake a cake. And this cake has some special requirements. It's not an ordinary cake. We want this cake to be distributed at a massive scale, right? We want it to be able to be shipped all over the place and enjoyed from many different locations. We also want to do that at the same time. We want to be able to eat the cake at the same time as someone else, and enjoy kind of like the same cake as them from anywhere in the world. So we want a location independent, cake as a service product. Yes, so no time to waste. Let's get to the drawing board. Let's start with our first iteration of the cake. So what I do know about cake is that in order to make it, you need some ingredients. So baking a cake is basically a process of taking these ingredients, mixing them up, putting it in the oven, and then you take those build artifacts from the cake, and you sort of compile them into this little delicious treat. So this is our first iteration of cake. Great. Let's take the cake, and hopefully you've got a friend who has a birthday coming up. So let's take this cake and throw a little birthday party. Okay, we're celebrating. We got this awesome cake, right? Now we're all in this birthday party, eating this cake, and we're all eating it together, right? And it is the same cake. So this is kind of like the LAN party of cakes, if you will. It's sort of like, it's similar in the sense that we have to be in the same room. We're there at the same time. We're face to face. We're enjoying the same cake together in a room, basically. So this is like the LAN party of cakes. So we did it, right? We made a cake, and everyone has the same cake in the room, and we're also eating it together with them, and we can also eat it whenever we want. Okay, let's rethink it. Okay, we got to go back to the drawing board here. Let's just back this up a little bit. So cake version 1. Let's make a little major revision to the cake. And so what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna switch it up. I'm gonna say, okay, instead of baking the cake, let's build a recipe. Let's like write down the instructions to make a cake, and then we can distribute those instructions. So maybe we'll make like a website, and we'll put plenty of just the weirdest ads on our recipe website to make all of that sweet moolah. So now we've got this kind of cake that it's sort of a cake. It's like a cake, it's like cake code. It's code for making a cake. So what changed here is how we distribute the cake. So, instead of us baking the cake ourselves, we distribute the recipe, and then we have all of our friends, all of our customers, our users. They're going to be building the cake themselves in their homes. So this is great, right? Because now we can say that everyone is building the same cake. We all get the same cake, and we're all enjoying it. So now what I can do that I couldn't do before is I can call my friend over the phone, and we can talk about the cake, and we can discuss the intricate details of how it tastes, right? Maybe we can even do some scientific experiments with it. Hopefully we have the same cake. This is kind of like the Minecraft 2012 Minecraft cracked client from Mediafire distribution model. So it's sort of like you go to a website, you download your cake recipe, and then you run it on your hot computer in the kitchen, and then you end up with this cake, right? So baking is hard though. Can we make this better? Why are we all baking this cake in here? That's like a lot of time, right? The scalability of this is not very high. For every house, for every customer that we add, right? They have to all spend the same amount of time baking. So let's get a little industrious and let's build a cake factory. Okay, I'm talking whatever the heck these machines are. I'm talking automated egg beaters, automated cake icers, rotating circular cake disc rotors, the whole works, obviously. All the stuff that you got to have, right? And this is going to give us a supreme level of quality control. We're going to be able to bake pretty much the exact same cake, over and over again, right? And then we can take that cake, we can put it on a truck, we can put it in a box on a truck even, right? That's probably be a good idea. And then we can take that to the store, and then you and I, we can both go to the store and we can, buy the same cake. We did it. We have the same cake. It's everywhere across the country, maybe even the world, right? If you're a super industrious cake developer. So this is kind of like your AAA cake studio, okay? Like this is like your Cake of Duty. This is like your Valorant, your League of Confectionaries and Defense of the Flower, right? But you knew this was coming, right? You absolutely knew that this joke was coming, and here it is. So I'm gonna move to the next slide. The cake was kind of a lie, okay? So in order to elaborate on that, right, I'm gonna talk about infrastructure. So infrastructure I'm defining as kind of like tools and other things that you need to develop your product that aren't really the product itself. So roads are a good example of public infrastructure, right? We use the roads to distribute our cake, right? We drove the trucks on the roads. But let's take a step back and think about, now we're going to start talking more and more about video games, right? So what is the infrastructure for a video game? Well, it's computers, right? It's this stuff. It's like it's your cloud, it's your data center, it's your not this. This is something else, but it's this kind of stuff, right? It's like these giant things, these servers, computers that you run your programs on. So video games, right? They multiplayer video games usually follow this kind of client-server model where you have clients, which is your computer, playing the game, and the server, which is someone else's computer that is sort of running the game, right? So, and this server is going to be a centralized location. You and I, if we want to play a game together, we got to connect to the same server. So this is your infrastructure for video games. It's a computer, right? So great. We can see this in Heisty Heist, playdopegames.com/HeistyHeist. We can see that when you create a game in Heisty Heist, it has to reach out to a centralized location, a server, right? And it does that with a URL. And we're going to get more into how that's configured. So what is in a server, right? What is in a server, which is just a computer, right? What's in a server? Well, it's going to be like your web servers, like Nginx, your API. Maybe you're running a Node.js API. Your databases, MySQL, MongoDB, Flask. It's another API framework for Python. So we're going to have a bunch of these programs like on a server. And these are kind of like our ingredients. Like we got all these little ingredients, and they got to go into a server. So now this is where we're going to start this is when we're going to start baking, right? We're going to start baking our server. So let's take these ingredients and let's turn it into a server. So let's get started, right? No time to waste. We already spent a bunch of time making a giant cake factory when we were supposed to be making video games. So this process, right? We want to do this for the video game. The problem is that this is what baking a cake looks like, and then this is what your computer software application looks like. Oh my God, what is going on here? This is what it looks like. So in order to do this, we need some pretty sophisticated tools. So, but let's just get building. You know what? Screw it. I don't need to do any research. We're going to do this ourselves. I'm going to hack this thing together, and we are going to just take all these little programs and I'm going to hack them, and boom, we got a server, right? So I'm going to be going in. I'm going to be doing this virtual environment for Python. I'll be updating packages, writing config files. This is like a web server config. And we could all do this manually, right? And we could do this manually, and we would end up with a server at the end, right? But like, what happens if something goes wrong in the middle? What happens if what happens if you make a mistake and you don't know where? Like you made, anything could happen. This is the Wild West, right? Anything could happen while you're doing this, while you're just raw dogging the server like this. So let's talk about a different kind of programming. when you're normally writing programs, you're writing one program. However, can we do this type of programming where we're programming a server? Can we automate this type of stuff the same way we automate other things in our programs? And the answer is yeah, we totally can. We can totally build this server factory. That's what we want, is we want this reproducible server factory that runs and produces that output that we want. So one tool, and this kind of forms the base layer that we use, is something called Terraform. So Terraform is a tool to automate infrastructure. If you read that, it says infrastructure automation to provision and manage resources in any cloud or data center. So basically, we can write code that creates servers and other stuff in AWS. We call this infrastructure as code. So it basically takes like this process of creating a server in AWS, where you might manually go in and click some buttons and whatnot, and configure a server like literally by hand, and it turns it into like a nice little fun programming activity where you just write, oh, instead of clicking a box and going through a bunch of drop downs and stuff and things, I just type, I want a t3.micro EC2, and it's there, right? And you run it and it does it, right? And it does this via basically the AWS API, and the Terraform's kind of on their homepage, they say that Terraform codifies cloud APIs into declarative configuration files. So basically, you write this configuration file, and then Terraform figures out what API calls it needs to do to create your server. So yeah, now we got a computer. Okay, step one done. We got a computer using Terraform, but it's totally empty. It has nothing on it, right? It doesn't even have any packages. It's not updated. It's maybe it doesn't even have any users, right? This Terraform gets us some way to our application. It forms kind of a base layer. All right, now we're bringing the cake analogy back in. We're bringing it back. So the Terraform serves as kind of this base layer to provision things like servers that everything else needs to depend on it. Terraform is like the very first, it's like the genesis of our entire application. Next, we have to do this stuff that we talked about. Next, we have to put this stuff on the server. How are we going to do that? Well, this is where our second tool comes in, Ansible. So Ansible is an automation tool for basically configuring servers. That's basically how we use it. It's a tool for configuring servers. So we take this process where we replace ourselves as the hacker person hacking things together. We replace that with Ansible. Boom. And all of a sudden, there's no more human interaction, no more human errors or inputs in here. It's all Ansibleized, okay? Ansible is going to automate this away for us. And how is it going to do it? Playbooks. So if you know anything about sports, which I'm assuming you probably don't because you're watching this video. In sport, a book describing plays that a player or team may run in games. That is the Wikipedia definition of playbook, which in our case looks a lot less like this and more like this, install packages or writing files, right? They're just little atomic actions that you can do on a server. So they're kind of like scripts. So basically what Ansible does for us is it takes these applications that we have here, and it kind of helps us fill in the gaps to connect them. So here's like saying MySQL runs on port 3306, Flask on 9001, here's a config file, here's a version, right? Ansible helps us fill these things in. So now we got Ansible as the second layer to our cake. And this is a lot of power. So think about what we just did. We just automated this whole process of taking applications and servers, and it's all done in code. Right? There's a lot of power. So why are these tools awesome? Why do we need to use them? Let me just summarize and say reproducibility. So these tools allow us to have a reproducible environment that can be replicated between, say, like a development, acceptance, and production environment. It also means if we need to tear down the infrastructure, we can bring it right back up incredibly quickly and accurately. It's also kind of serves like documentation. It's like if anything is configured in the infrastructure, it's written down in code, so you can always figure it out. It might not be easy, but you can always figure it out. And of course, automation, like I mentioned, right? We can take some development for our infrastructure in a lower environment, test it, test the heck out of it, make sure that it works. And we can just bring that straight up to a production environment, or a higher environment, right? So this then completes the final layer of our cake, where the application sits right on top. In fact, I would even say that the application is more like the sprinkles on a cake. It's the sprinkles and frosting. It's like something that only comes after everything else has been assembled. So thank you for listening. My name is Andrew Weller, and here's some information about me on the screen.